Hi, soul friends. It's Tannaz Hosseinpour, and welcome back to another episode of the Minutes on Growth podcast. Today, we have a lovely guest with us, Barbara Burgess. She is an author, she is a founder and executive, and we were just having the most delicious, wholesome conversation before I pressed record. So I'm so excited to have her here with us. Welcome.
Thank you. It's just a delight to be here.
So, your book, Enough.
Mm,
Straight to the point, such a powerful title. And, I love it because we are living in a day time period where this not enoughness is being thrown in our face. So you're not
mhm,
pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you're not sexy enough, you're not rich enough. And so we're constantly like bathing in this feeling of not enoughness, this feeling of lack. So it's so refreshing to hear enough. Like
mm.
you are enough. So I'm curious, like what led you to write this book?
I think as I think many people experience sometimes, it did feel like something that came and was written through me, in the sense of I had an experience, and it's the first story I talk about in the book about this experience of setting chalk out on my sidewalk in the city here in Chicago, and how that became this beautiful sort of community bonding and expression and all that kind of thing. But at that moment of that experience, I had a really physical, felt sense in my body of enough. And I say she came into my life like a true friend and character, who joined me on this journey. And as I got to know her more deeply, in contrast, I got to know not enough more clearly, right? So I think, I started having these experiences, and it just felt sort of natural to begin capturing them. And, I said to you before we started, it's a labor of love. It's not like there's a huge agenda of this other than have this beautiful experience myself and wanting to express that and share it. And, for whomever that moves them, I wanted that to be the case. But I also have said to several friends, in some ways, the actual publishing of the book was the beginning of it teaching me. So, I'm not a big believer in experts or
Mhm.
thought leaders. I really do believe that we're all sort of mutual journeyers in this
Mhm.
life experience. And so, what's been interesting is although these concepts were coming and I was having a lot of experiences, I feel like it's been more so since the book was published. So, even last weekend, I found myself going down one of the wormholes of not enough and comparing myself and getting that mode. The only difference is now I'm like, he's a straight on character to me. And I'm like, I see you. I hear you. And yeah, no, no, thank you. We're turning down the volume. Not that interested. I have a bigger, richer life. Thank you so much. So it truly is just an experience that began happening to me. I thought, why not record it?
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
What does the embodiment of enough look like?
Yeah. I would say for me, probably it's a more embodied feeling
Mhm.
than it is a vision, because I think and lovely and surprising is that sense of enough can come in so many different ways. Like, small example this morning, I, dropped my daughter off at school. I was driving home, and, we're in the city and people get cranky driving and all those moments. And I just was in a more settled space in my body of, that sense of enough and okay. And, she and I had had a lovely little interchange, which as a teenager doesn't always happen. And so I'm driving, and then all of a sudden I see, like, out of my peripheral vision, there's a woman trying to cross the street. And there's a lot of crosswalks, but they're not a stop sign or a stop light. And I just was aware, I'm like, I'm pausing and I'm holding space for her. And you can't control if the car next to you is going to stop, also, right? All you can do is kind of, but it felt like this, again, beautiful moment where I'm like, here's a woman trying to cross a busy street. I'm going to stop my car and hold space for her. And it's such a small, like, micro moment of our life, right? That we barely notice. But since enough has come into my life, it's magical. It's beautiful. I'm there. Luckily, the car next to me stopped. She, raised her hand, started walking across, and it's something that's so mundane. But for me, becomes this beautiful experience where I get to receive. Like, yes, I'm giving, but I'm really receiving in the giving.
Mhm.
And so these moments of enough are kind of everywhere, but it's that, it could be as simple as that. It could be as big as, meeting someone coincidentally who just fans your flames, right, in some powerful way. It could be just, as somebody who has struggled with my weight my whole life, it could be that moment that I will notice now where I'm like, hey, I'm actually liking myself. Like none of my clothes fit and I'm still loving myself. This is fantastic. Like, what is this moment? Right. So to me, the vision, it's a very personal experience of it. And more of my commitment to myself has been to open myself to these moments of enough to expand the possibilities for them to exist in my life, to welcome them in, to fan the flames of them, and to really starkly notice the difference between that and the not enough space, where it is the judgment, the criticism, the looking at a poster and thinking I should somehow look like that, right? So it's just more of the awareness of it. And for me, particularly, it's more of an embodied felt sense. Like when I am in the space of enough, I would guess if I were hooked up, my heart rate is probably in a steady rhythm,
Mhm.
my nervous system's pretty calmed, you know, big crises aren't a big deal. It's just like, yep, oh, there it is. The people that normally would irritate me and I'd be off to the races, it's just a little less so, so rather than a vision for me, it's really been kind of an embodied felt experience.
Mhm. I love that. So powerful. So the sense of presence, groundedness, alignment, at ease, regulation, all of these were coming
Yeah.
to mind as you were sharing those experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in our world, and I'll say particularly for women, I think it's pretty radical to
Hmm.
prioritize that, right? And you said it at the beginning, like all of the things we're bombarded with is my importance, my value will come out of the next thing I achieved or what I did or how I look or all those kinds of things. And I think it's really an act of rebellion and revolution to flip that on its head and say, I got it. I see you. Okay. But no, thank you, not for me. What I'm going to feel so wealthy about is this exchange you and I are having of this true sharing of spirit, of holding a space for the things that really matter. Like to me now at this stage of my life, like that's priceless gold. I don't know how you put an amount on that compared to, oh my gosh, did I do this? Did I do that? Do I feel, and so it really making the space for it, prioritizing it and valuing it, I think.
Mm. I love that because, especially I see this with even younger generations, the sense of if I don't look a certain way, act a certain way, think a certain way, I don't have value. And then so they are kind of attaching this need for validation and worth to external people and
Yeah.
circumstances. And none of those are in our control, right?
Yeah.
We're only in control of how we're responding to life and
Yeah.
not to actual life. So it seems like they don't have, as a result, they lose their standing and their footing on in life, and it just feels like just life doesn't feel like it's happening for me. It happens like it's happening to me, and it
Yeah.
becomes a struggle. So it really is important. I mean, for me, definitely when I was younger, that was my experience. And I think,
Well, that's what I was just going
yeah,
to say. Hello, welcome to like 5 decades of my life, right?
yeah.
In that kind of mode. And that's why this is so refreshing at a level is to really understand, like in the core of my DNA, that there is so much power, so much creativity, so much possibility in choosing differently than that. Like that is the game I
Yeah.
grew up with and played and worked to play well, thinking that would get me something, and of course it gets you some kind of external advancements, achievement, resume built, whatever you want to call it. But again, to really understand that when I do that, I am giving my power away
Hmm.
because my power is then dependent on all of those things you just mentioned, all of the
Yeah.
externals. Well, what happens when, and I say this like you can be the most beautiful model. And if you get in a car accident and your face is messed,
Hmm.
are you valuable? Do you get to exist? I say, well, yes, but if I have put all of my eggs in the basket that's where my value comes from, it's difficult, whether it's a change in body, a change in our finances, a change in life circumstances.
Mhm.
It's very unsteady
Mhm.
if my investments in who I am have been in the external people and others' opinions and things like that. But it's hard,
Mhm.
having kids who are teenagers. I respect their journey of conformity, of fitting in, of all. I get it. I've been there, and part of it is I'm not even sure that we don't need to go through that in order to come out the other side. I don't know. It's like testing all the possibilities. So yeah, I feel very much having spent a lot of my time there and being able to contrast it to how really fulfilling this journey is instead.
Right, right. It's so interesting that you said, like, can we even get to this po point without going through that? And you know, uh, for example, there's so much literature on how, after our 40s, it's like this period of enlightenment, and um, which kind of hints at the idea that going through that cycle is part of the process as well before we get to
Yeah.
that enlightened state, or that openness to that state. So that's a good point. But I'm curious. So, kind of saying no to not enough
Hmm.
requires us to kind of set some boundaries with
Yeah.
this bombarding energy that's coming at us. How do
Yeah.
we set those? How do we set boundaries unapologetically, but also in a way that's in alignment with our truth?
Yeah. Well, I will say for me, because again, I think there's so much work that people have done that's out there. They're beautiful books on boundaries and different things in that way. But the experience for me, what I had learned to set big boundaries. And, in the book, I call that the big no.
Mhm.
I had learned to stand up for myself if there was some sort of core violation of my values, experience, et cetera. And that took some time, right? Rather than
Mhm.
people pleasing or trying not to upset folks. So that was a part of the journey. But the real work for me in these, I say in the book, Beautiful Boundaries, Zero Apologies, the real work in there was learning to the small no's, because, it can be, we erode our sense of our power and our boundaries with a little yes here, a little yes there, all that kind of thing. And so again, it's really pretty radical to be in tune with ourself and say, is this a fit for me? And is this a fit for me right now? And I reserve the right to change my mind at any second, right? And to really claim that little no. So, maybe somebody invites you to a fundraiser and you feel like, well, it's a cool event and everybody's going and it's a privilege to be invited or whatever it is, but I don't wanna, And so to just be, I don't have a conflict. I could go, there's no logical reason not to, but no, thank you. Right. And just in and of itself to really claim that space. And, in my own journey, I have found that some of that, your friends, your relationships, your extended acquaintances are great with, and some get really upset by it. And I
Mhm.
think in some ways it's a reflection back of where they may not be drawing boundaries. I've had people say, "Why do you have a conflict?" I'm like, "No, it's just not a fit for me." Right? And it is a wild thing to say. Like, oh, like you should be going. If the space is available, there's an assumption that I've made a request, the space is available. It is your obligation to then step into that. And I think that's the real dangerous zone for us as far as the boundaries go, because all of a sudden you say a little yes, or, hey, will you store this stuff for me in your house? I know you got a lot of space. Hey, will you, and again, if it's a resonant thing, absolutely. But if it's not, the to claim back that power of the no, the small no, so life can be filled and designed in a way that's for me. And I want to go back to what you were just saying about, I about the enlightenment in which age. My spiritual beliefs are really that it really is a unique
Mhm.
playground that we've invited ourselves to here.
Mhm.
And I can't possibly know what my journey is vis-a-vis somebody else's. And that's where I think personal growth is so beautiful, but it can be dangerous. If personal growth becomes prescriptive of you need to do it the way I'm doing it, because look what I've received, this success. And so I think the marrying together of these very mundane boundaries along with that really honoring of, you know, tuning into what my spirit, my being is here to discover, play, be, and do,
Mhm.
is a beautiful marriage of, I think, the profane and the mundane at a level,
Mhm.
right? But it's not how we think about it, and I think we tend to get much more into our logical head about these no's and yeses when, to me, at least in my experience, that's not where my magic is. My magic is in my heart and in my body when I'm really tuned in, that it will tell me, and sometimes I don't know. Sometimes it's a 50-50 flip. I had one of these like 3 months ago, and it was somebody's birthday party, and I couldn't quite find the truth in myself. And I went and I regretted it, but I didn't know. So that was okay. It was just trying out and seeing how it was. But I think we increasingly get to be aligned as we practice and see,
Mhm.
gosh, what works for me.
Yeah, I love that of like strengthening the intuitive muscle, strengthening the gut muscle, the feeling muscle. Because exactly as you said, we're more comfortable going into the logical, right? It feels
Yeah.
safer,
Yeah.
whereas emotions can sometimes feel like it's outside of our control, and we always want to feel in control because it gives us this illusion of certainty. Um,
Yes.
so,
Well, that's the famous Helen Keller quote, security is an illusion. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. And I think the more experiences I have, the more I understand how much that security is an illusion.
mhm,
And so in some ways, I think for us as beings, it's terrifying
mhm,
to really let go of what we perceive as security. And on the other hand, when we can learn to, kind of step into the big black vastness, it's also really exciting and thrilling
mhm,
because if I'm not tied to that security, the possibilities just expand. It's just literally like the playing field opens and opens and opens because there are no rules to follow. Yes, there's what my parents did, what my friends are doing, what all those kinds of things are. But when you really step into the unknown, it's breaking all of that. Even when I wrote this book, it was, I had worked for some authors before. I knew how that thing works, blah, 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 blah. But that's not what I was doing. What I was doing is just kind of birthing this thing that came upon me to be birthed. And so it was birthed. And I know there's more to birth. It's not my job, I feel, for me in my spiritual essence to overthink it beyond that. I'm here to show up, to serve, to care, to connect to people. And that's going to lead me somewhere. I don't know where, but it's kind of cool.
yeah, it's exciting, that limitless potential that is beyond our scope of current comprehension, right?
Yeah.
Beyond our current consciousness. Um, I when I wake up, the only prayer, that's my only morning routine, is universe, tell me where to go, what to say, and who to say it to. And then
Oh, it's beautiful.
and then just being a medium, like we talked before I
Yeah.
pressed record, is how
Yeah.
can we be this vessel, this medium for the universe to manifest its visions through us? And
Yeah.
like when you said the book wrote itself, I love that because it just represents you being a vessel for that creative energy to flow through you, and you not standing in the way, right? Saying like, use
Yeah.
me, let me write this for you, allow me to write this for you. So that's such an empowering state. And I want to kind of talk about this a little bit more because it really is so expansive in nature to
Hmm.
allow yourself to surrender yourself to that greatest vision. So, how did that come about for you? Because I know you're, a founder, you're an executive, you're a writer, performed your play, so many different wonderful manifestations of this creative energy. Um,
Yeah.
how did this come by?
Well, I think there are two aspects of that, and I'm thinking about from a business perspective. I had been in the same job for 22 years, and I think the choice to leave and step away from that, something that wasn't serving me any longer, really created an opening to say, okay, what now? Now, again, I'm very, as much as I, live with spirit as my guide, I'm a really practical kind of gal, right? So I still need to pay the bills, I still need to do all those kinds of things, and so. But even that doesn't have to be a separate thing, right? So it's
Mhm.
really opening myself up to what's possible. And so even in building my business, it was kind of like the prayer you said, which I think is just so beautiful and so moving. It's like, all right, I'm going to put myself out, and who am I going to discover today? I wonder what paths I'll be led down, in these very quote unquote non-traditional ways to build business. And I remember even running across people from, different phases of my life ask me, like, in the traditional, like, analytical way, well, are you doing this for your business? Or are you doing this for your business? And it depends on my relationship with them. But the truth was, my honest answer would have been, yeah, no, I'm just kind of following spirit, and it's all working. So there were cracks in the sidewalk, I think, that really I hadn't given myself permission for, because I had so been following that external map that I thought was the one. And there was something about this permission giving of saying, hey, gosh, I don't need to. I could do it some other way. And so that sort of opened doors and possibilities, and really giving myself moments. And again, they don't even have to be long, but carving space for the nothingness, which we tend to look at in our culture as wasted time, as laziness, where I find is the deepest opportunities for productivity in the spirit sense, right? So I would go to a coffee shop and let myself just wander down things that interest me. So I love nature. And so I might binge watch some TED Talks about plants communicating to each other. I love sacred geometry. So I might go get into something about a Fibonacci code, or, but it's really opening, myself up to, like, that is as much of my quote unquote productivity in my life as these other things I had made up. And then the interesting thing is how much that wove itself into my business. So again, I think we historically have this mindset of separating those two things. But just like your prayer, as a coach, I'll often get on what's called a chem check call. So someone will get on and they'd be interviewing me and two other coaches, and they're deciding whether or not I'm a fit for them. And, people don't know this before I get on, but before everyone, I say, if this is meant for me, please draw it to me like the strongest magnet, this human to serve. And if they are not meant to be in my space, please radically pull them away from my centeredness. And so to me, like, this is a business call, quote unquote, right? You think like, oh, you leave your spirituality for later by the side. I'm like, no, 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 no. Right in that moment. And then in that space, it's the same kind of thing as sitting at the coffee shop. I'm opening my heart up to who's in front of me. I'm curious about them. How can I serve them? And whether they pick me or not is not my business. It's just my business to be that vessel. That vessel might be a creative book about enough. That vessel might be a business insight. That vessel, it could be anything. And so I think the more that I had moved away from that old mindset of what I thought I needed to be doing, and gave myself permission to create, to play in all the moments of my life, the more it kept coming. And, I say to people when they're launching businesses, it's very fascinating to watch if at least from my experience, if I start to measure, if I'm too driven or I get worried about money or business or things like that, it's truly like my pipeline dries up. And when in the moments I've learned to catch that, not enough, right? I've learned to catch myself and be like, oh, honey, I see you. There you are doing your thing again. Let's put that aside and let's just go have some fun. Let's walk at the lake. Let's do something creative. Let's play, etc. And all of a sudden I'm back in that space of receiving whatever my next mission is to serve, that also has, income attached to it. So it's not a separate thing to me, but I think the move from just going through the rut of what I thought I was supposed to do into this space really created huge opportunity.
Mm. I love that. So, kind of, you feel that like your role is to just show up, be that person, be that centered energy, and the
Hmm.
how and what manifests is you've kind of left it to the universe, but you trust that vision that what is meant for you is for you, and what isn't will naturally fall apart.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't mean it's not practical. I think my younger self, I was raised Catholic, but then I rebelled against that and went on a huge metaphysical journey. But I think at the time I wasn't in touch with my own pain. I
Mhm.
wasn't in touch with the really, sort of traumatic, unresolved parts of myself. And so I was looking for spirit and metaphysics and all that kind of stuff as an escape from, those darker spaces I was afraid to look at. And I think the more that I kind of stepped into some of those spaces, explored, it was like I came back to these spirit spaces, but in a different way.
Mhm.
Because now to me, they're not to solve any of that. And even same thing with a business perspective, I still, you know, reached out to people. I did networking. I met with folks. I set up a QuickBooks. I did, you know what I mean? I did all that practical stuff. So, my partnership with spirit is not like in the old days, I might have like, I'm just going to sit on my bed and
Yeah.
visualize and, say this phrase over and over again. And like, I'll be discovered, like, no, 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 no. Like I move and engage and, play with life very concretely. But to your point, I try not to control what that means. The outcome really isn't mine to drive. I can envision, picture, hold, sense, embrace things that feel good to me. But at the end of days, there is a certain level of releasing the plan I think I have, because I think sometimes spirit's got a much better one.
Always.
And I'm sitting
Always.
here like I gave a friend of mine and a person I was coaching this vision. I said, here's what I see you doing. And I said, it's like you're on a yacht, but you're on the outside. Like there's this walkway that runs around the yacht and you're hanging on to the side of this yacht. And it's beautiful. It's lovely. And it's better than anything you can imagine. And you're terrified of letting go because it's so good, comparatively speaking, right? But what you can't see is if you actually let go, you would drop onto a plankway that, if you turned around, would lead you to this yacht that's like 10 times the size, that
Hmm.
has even more wonders. But out of that fear of letting go, of, taking my hands off of what has been up to this point, you're missing out on all kinds of stuff because I
Yeah.
don't know it's there, but I can't know it's there until I let go.
Yeah. Yeah. Always when I'm making a prayer, we say this or better, like or better
Yes.
in bold because
Yes. Oh, yes.
because
Yes.
I
That is
don't
also one
know.
of my mantras. Yeah. Yeah. And I welcome the better, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But I love how you again highlighted the importance of showing up. And I think, when I first started learning about manifestation, all of that, when I was like 17 from The Secret, I was like, okay, so I'm just going to sit down and think about it and visualize the check. And it wasn't happening. I'm like, why isn't it
Yeah.
happening? What is wrong? And I realized there's no attraction without action. The word is literally in the other
I
one.
love that.
So
Yeah.
you need to show
Beautifully
up and
said.
take inspired action. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's the missing point. And
Yeah.
so you mentioning that is so powerful and so empowering of people realizing that, first of all, you can be a medium for multiple different creative manifestations. Like again, you are an author, you're an executive, you're a founder, you're a performer, all of these, you're a mother, it's all of these, but it requires you to actually show up to your own life.
Yeah, and I think some of those, like, I part of I never thought I would be my own business owner because I had a stereotype in my mind of what that looked like, right? But part of that stereotype, somebody who's a big risk taker, and I thought, oh, I'm not a big risk taker, in that regard. And I'm not in that stereotypical sense, but I have discovered, like, no, I love to try new things. I love to go out there and experiment. I love to, like, it is just as much of creative artistic play of, I wonder how else this could happen, right? And so I think to your point about the action is, you know, just trying stuff and trying little stuff and saying it out loud. And I think also, I know you've talked about this in past podcasts, but know, intentionally surrounding yourself with people who fan the flame of that. And in those boundaries, being very protective of the folks who are gonna, not. And I think of it like there's a little sprout coming out, and I'm putting a glass jar around that sprout so that it has the opportunity to grow without somebody's boot stepping on it. And I think in the boundary space for me, it's constantly watching that. It's not just a one and done thing. It's like
Mm.
when I interact with someone, do I leave that space feeling expanded, uplifted, inspired, or do I leave that space feeling not enough? And it doesn't matter how cool they are, how important they are, how whatever in the worldly terms, to trust that no, 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 no. If I feel expanded and uplifted by you, I can't wait to be with you again. But if somehow in our interaction I'm sitting here leaving feeling not enough, then this is probably not a fit for at this moment in my life. And again, that's my growth work and reflection to do, or it says something about them. I don't know. I don't need to think about it. I just need to be increasingly protective of those boundaries. And I think when we're doing things like this, there are plenty of people that are going to tell you about why it's not going to work or why it's not logical or what you should do. And, it's just, again, having, even as a early mother, like everyone wants to give you their mothering advice. It's mostly well intended, but it doesn't actually serve. What serves is really understanding, like, this is my journey, and whatever, like, what is a failure anyway? Like, even if this
Mhm.
flopped, I would more regret at the end of my days not having played, not
Yeah.
having tried it out than I would, having avoided that flop.
Hmm. Mm. Ooh, I love that. I love that because often we don't follow that spark because of fear of failure and fear of judgment, and just reframing that to, this, even if it does fail, it's wisdom earned, it's insights earned, it's skills earned, and you can take that and build something else with it, and just having fun, that feminine yin energy of playfulness
Yes.
and
Yeah.
joy.
And who defines what failure is? Like, this is what's so fascinating, right? I think about what others might perceive as the biggest mistakes, flops in my life. They were my juiciest learning, or the
Mhm.
places where I wrote the best bad poetry, or, when it came to creative expression, they took me inside myself in deep ways. So, like, wait, are those the ones I was supposed to skip? And again, I think oftentimes I'll think about the end of days moment, when I'm transitioning from this space to another space. And I think, again, as a kid, I used to think like there was going to be the tick list of what you did that was good and bad, that
Mhm.
was, did you get the A? Do you get to sit, on a fluffy cloud somewhere? And my belief system now is that I think, if there's some, concentrated manifestation of God, love, life at those transition moments, that entity is going to go, so what'd you think? How
Yeah.
was it? Like, did you enjoy yourself? Did you play? Did you do what you came to do? Like, and so now in my life, it's more like, I don't want to miss those opportunities, and not out of a sense of should, not out of a sense of not enough, but out of a sense of, you said it, that yin, the feminine, the play. Like, oh my gosh, there's so much to play with, right? And how many ways in my life, because of that voice of not enough, had I shut down those pathways, like, oh, well, yeah, you can sing, but you're not a great singer. Okay, yeah, you like to do art, but you're not like an artist. You can do this, but you're not, right? And I think in many ways, our particularly Western culture limits us to like
Mhm.
some definition of what we do for money as a definition. And what's so fun is to discover like you can throw off all of that. Yes, I get to be anything I want to be. I get to be singer, writer, artist, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't mean that it matters if a million people followed me. Like, no, that's somebody else's scale. What matters is did I have fun doing it? Was it a good experience just to try it out? Maybe I tried it out and realized, oh, I didn't even enjoy that. That's part of the wonderful adventure too.
Yeah. Wow, I love it. It's been such a wholesome episode of, like, it's a feeling episode. You got to really feel the words that we're saying, and I'm feeling it when you're sharing it. It's been so, so, so lovely, insightful, and expansive. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. How can the audience connect with you?
Oh, beautiful. And I just want to say thank you. It's lovely. Your listeners probably feel it in your voice, but when you get on here, she creates an amazing space that is not visual probably, but tangible nonetheless. So I appreciate you doing that as well. So my website is corluma.com, corluma.com, and which really means heart plus light, core plus luma. That's kind of my business and those kinds of things. But if people want to learn more about the book or find out where to buy it, it's beenough.com. And there's a landing page. You can get a little weekly inspiration if you just want to be reminded of that message of enough as well.
Beautiful. I'm going to share those links in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Barbara, for giving us your time, your energy, your insights, and your wisdom. It's been beautiful and wonderful having you.
Thank you. Total honor to be here.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Speak soon.